This little ham HT has nearly all the features I'd choose when building an HT. Let's take a look. In this video, we're going to take a look at the GA-5WB ham HT, just released by Radioddity. While they've provided review radios to me in the past, that's not the case this time. This one I purchased using funds from channel views and affiliate link purchases. Speaking of those things, thank you for subscribing to the Gadget Talk channel and clicking that like button. If you haven't yet, well, you know what to do. I really appreciate it. Before we jump into the review of the very cool features included with this radio, let me do a bit of spoiler alert. As we'll see in a minute, the radio has a clean signal and the power output comes very close to the advertised output. So, let's dig in. As I mentioned in the intro, the GA-5WB's feature set includes everything I'd want in an analog FM HT. The GA-5WB is a dual-band HT with both receive and transmit capabilities from 136 to 174 MHz in the VHF band and 400 to 520 MHz in the UHF band. That coverage includes more than just ham bands in the US, so be sure to be mindful of the limits of your license. A very popular feature recently has been the inclusion of AM airband for listening in on-air traffic communications. The GA-5WB includes that too. Keep in mind that these little HTs are line of sight, so you'll need to be pretty close to the airport to pick up communications from the ground. Transmissions from aircraft are usually much clearer when they're airborne. Another of my desired features is a high IP score. IP stands for intrusion or ingress protection. The first number refers to hard stuff like dirt, sticks, and dust. The second number refers to how well the device keeps water out. The GA-5WB 67 score means that it's dust-proof and will survive submersion in up to a meter of water for 30 minutes. This makes the radio a good choice for those who spend a lot of time in the outdoors and around lakes and streams and so forth. The next feature I'd want is wireless programming. As we'll see coming up, the GA-5WB is programmable via a smartphone app, either iOS or Android, and this eliminates the need for a separate programming cable and computer. In fact, the GA-5WB doesn't have a CPS at all, just the app. Related to wireless programming is compatibility with Bluetooth devices. This means you can pair a Bluetooth headset or PTT button to the radio for hands-free operation. This might be becoming more important, as I recently read that one state has removed the radio microphone exemption from their hands-free driving rules. If implemented, holding your ham HT would get you the same fine as holding a phone. That's not good, but there it is. The GA-5WB also includes a couple of data sharing modes. One is proprietary and the other is APRS. Having APRS in an HT at this price range, well, is pretty cool. Speaking of price range, the GA-5WB is above the budget price category. Its normal price comes in at about $180. That puts it in the neighborhood of Yaesu and ICOM analog FM HTs. Let's take a look at what you'll get with the GA-5WB. So here's what you get when your radio comes. You get a little antenna, and it's typical of the antennas that you're getting nowadays, and that is they're not the hard rubber duckies. They've got a little bit of flex to them. There's a USB charging cable that comes with it, the belt clip that mounts on the back of the radio, not the battery. I'll show you that in just a minute. And then this package of these little collars. And as you see here, I put one on the foot of the antenna. It seems to fit there. It's not described. I don't know what it's necessarily for, but if you had several of them, it'd be a good way to have a visual indicator of which radio is which. So that's what I've done with it. Not sure if that's right, but there we are. So we'll do a little tour of the outside of the radio. The controls are pretty typical. Across the front, there's the big screen here on the front, menu, exit. The rocker panel allows you to go up and down, so channel up, channel down, go left and right within the menu system. We've got the numbers 1 through 0 plus, hashtag and star. And these have letters printed on them. So there's an ability here to name channels in the radio, which is kind of unique. A lot of budget class radios, you can name them, but you have to name them in the software. So this one, you can name it in the radio itself. On this side, we've got the push-to-talk button. We've got 2 programmable side keys, which are handy. I've got this one, I think, monitor and turn on the FM radio. And they each have 3 choices. They've got a press, a double press, and a long press. And so on this one, I've got the double press, move backwards in the programming group, and then move forward in the programming groups with a long press. And that'll mean more to you when we get to the app, as the channels within the radio, there's a bunch of channels, but there's 12 groups, and each group has 16. And so you can load groups into the radio. And so that's why you're managing the group that you're in, depending upon the situation and how you've chosen to program your radio. More about that later. In the back, here's the radio. It's got a USB-C charging, a LED to indicate the charge status. Here's the screw holes for the belt clip. And on this side, we've got a hard cover that screws in, again, because this has got an IP67 score, intrusion protection score. The K1 connector is there. And then obviously, if you've got something plugged into that connector, you don't have the same intrusion protection as you would otherwise. Here on the top, one of the interesting things is no flashlight on this radio, either on the top or on the bottom. This LED panel here will show red and green depending on whether it's receiving or transmitting. It's got the SMA male connector here, and then the on-off and volume control here. And then across the top here, there's some hatching, and the GPS receiver that is included with this radio is mounted under there. So that's a quick tour of the exterior of our little GA-5WB. Here's a quick look at the radio with the power on. Note the menu structure is different from your basic Baofeng radio with 40 to 50 menu items in the list. This radio breaks the menus into categories for easier access. So let's turn the radio on and take a look at the menus. So we've got the radio on. This is my club repeater, UHF call, VHF call, and I've got about 15 different channels programmed into this basic VHF group that I labeled. And as I mentioned before, if I want to change my grouping, I can press a long press on this side key. And now I'm in my UHF base channel. And this one has the local UHF repeaters and frequencies in it. So I've got, again, VHF call. I've got that in both of them. But there's UHF call, and then that Sun City repeater isn't there because it's a VHF repeater. So I've got Shaw Butte, some other repeaters here in the area, and I can have up to 16 in this group. And then my other groups are empty at this point. So I'm going to do a double press on the lower one, and that should take me backwards a group. And now I'm back to VHF base. It's the VHF call, UHF call, and there I'm back to Sun City. So you've got these groups of 16, and I chose to use a programming key. You can also use the menu to move between the groups, but I just thought it would be fun to have it set up that way. Now, the other thing that you can set is the power setting. So you can see I've got it on high right here. And in this case, if I take, again, the lower key and do just a regular press, you can see the power changes. So now it's low, now it's medium, and now it's high. And so for me, these make sense for that lower key, and I can do most of my controls easily with button presses on the lower key. Again, the upper key, if I do a long press, I think it just goes into monitor mode. I didn't hear anything. A short press turns the AM receiver on. Short press turns it off. And so those are programmable here in the software. So let's go to the menus themselves. And you're going to see that there's a difference here from the typical Baofeng or some of the other radio menus that have like 40 to 50 consecutive menu items. This one is in groups. And so I just bumped my volume control there. Channel, I find, is really handy because if you've got a channel selected, if you select it, it gives you the name, and when you go into it, you can edit it, and you can edit these things. So you can change the name or add a name. You can double check your frequencies, put in CT, CSS, and DCS codes. So it makes editing a channel and adding a channel on the radio really easy. You just go to one menu and all the things kind of pop up on one screen, and then you use these buttons to make changes there. Now, I don't want to make any changes, so I'm going to edit that back out. And so now let's go down to signaling. And so here is the signaling components, and it's quite comprehensive, and I haven't figured all of it out yet, but a lot of it is using this BSS signaling protocol that's used by this brand of radio. But I can send messages, I can call, I can check in, I can check to see where nearby people are, and so forth. So that's all in the signaling, which is an interesting set of menus. I get my overall radio settings here, so I can turn my dual watch on and off, scan, talk arounds, power, subtones. Here, if I go into channel group, you can see that here are all the channel groups that I have. I've labeled 1 and 2, as I've described with you already. I can make selections here if I want to, or I can use the button, and I just, choose to use the buttons. If I go down, I can make changes to my squelch level, my timeout timer, squelch till elimination. All of those typical kinds of menus are here in this radio settings menu. Now I've got general settings, and here I've got connection, signaling settings. Here's where my APRS settings are. I can put in the frequency. In my case, I put channel 16 in my VHF base as the APRS frequency, and I can set that so I know that it's going to go out on 16. So in my groups, so if I change groups, I'm going to put APRS on channel 16. This is going to look for channel 16, so I'm not beaconing out on a non-APRS signal. Here are my APRS settings, my call signs, my path, my passcode. I entered that in, and it says correct as opposed to displaying the passcode itself. In digital mode, I can enable it or not. I can then share information such as my location. I can select channels, and so channels are a way to use groupings. It's kind of like that group mode in Yaesu radio. So you can set a channel, and anyone who assigns a channel or joins the channel you can interact with. Sound settings are what you think they are. Same with display settings. Resets allow you to make changes or reset to factory. There's another factory reset overall. So those are my general settings. There really is quite a lot in these menus, and instead of having 172 menu items to scroll through, they're grouped, and it'll probably take me a little while to figure out what's in what, and may have some false starts from time to time to get to what I want. But for the basic things I want, I've got them on that lower side key, and I can do most of my radio operations using, the up and down buttons for channels, the volume, and then this lower side key. I mentioned power output earlier. Here's a clip of the radio's power outputs. So let's take a look at the power output of this radio. I've got it in the VHF call frequency, so in the lower band, and I've got it on high power. So let's hit the push to talk. It's going into my MFJ 874 into a dummy load, by the way. So here we go. I've got it set for 5 watts and it's showing forward power. So let's see what we get. Looks like about 4.6 on high power. That's not bad. This is low power. Looks like it's about 2.1. And on medium power, about 3.5. So that's pretty reasonable for a radio that's advertised for 5 watts to be up there just a couple of tenths below 5. Not bad. Let's go up to the UHF band now. So here's UHF call channel, again going into that dummy load on high power. It's a little bit lower, about 3.5, 3.6. Low power, looks like about 1.1, 1.2. And medium power is right at 3 watts. So a little bit lower across the board in the UHF bands, which is not unusual for these radios and these final amplifiers. And so not bad. Power's looking pretty good coming out of the GA-5WB. Here's a quick clip of the GA-5WB connected to my Tiny SA. As you see, the radio has a clean signal, which you'd expect for a radio in this price range. So here I've got the GA-5WB all connected to my Tiny SA. I've got a minus 40 dB right there, and I've got the power on high. So let's transmit a little bit into the Tiny SA and see what we get. Okay, so down here is 0, up here is 350 on the Tiny, so this is the 146.52, and you can see it's hitting at about 10 or 11, and down here there's a little bit of a spur, but it's at minus 40, so that's like 50 dB less, and it's certainly way less than the minus 16 that it needs to be, so that's looking pretty good. So all in all, that's not bad. It's below the 40 dB, and it's below that 1602. So clean radio, that's good. Now, let's listen in on what the radio sounds like, both receiving and transmitting. I probably should have had the volume up on the radio for the first segment. Just know that there was quite a bit more volume available.
GA-5WB receive test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Test out. GA-5WB transmit test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Test out.
The radio comes with a manual for the programming app. There is a lot to the app that goes beyond just programming the radio. There are channels that appear to be available for groups to connect to via the internet. The app also appears to act as the radio when using a channel, as well as when using the phone to control the radio. The connection process is well documented, but I found there are a couple of nuances when programming memories. Here's a quick look at getting to the Channel Manager screen. This is where you'd add channels. Once added, you can then use the Group Manager screen to add channels to your various groups. This makes it much easier to add channels rather than adding info into the squares in that main group display. So here's the HT app on my Galaxy S22, and you can see I've got it connected. I've got, volume off and that kind of thing. If we go here, we can get into the groups that I've been talking about. And so here we have 16 channels. I've got my APRS on channel 16, and here are the other channels that I have programmed in. If I go here, I can get into my group manager, and it'll list the groups I have. So I can go over to group VHF, and this has a different set of repeaters. But again, my APRS is on channel 16, since that's where I have the radio set to transmit. Now, one of the things I did want to point out to you, though, here is that you can enter information in these squares, but it's much easier to go to the settings, or up here. I'm going to go into settings, And in this case, I want to go into the channel manager. And so here are all the channels that I have listed. Now, these all came with the radio, and I can just click on these and delete them because they're just random channels. But what I've done is I've added my channels here. And so the various APRS channels, the UHF and VHF repeaters are all here. And then to add a channel, I just hit plus, and then I can give the channel a title, frequency, and so forth. And then when I go into my channel group manager, I can go into my various groups. And so in this case, I'll open up group there, and I can delete channels, or I can go into my empty channels, and then I can link channels, and I'm linking them from the main channel manager. So that's a little different than typical channel programming. And so that makes it a lot easier to input channels into these various channel groups, depending upon how you want to arrange your groups. And there's one other thing I want to point out before we go too much further, and that is the simple mode versus the complex mode. If you are finding you're having a little bit of trouble adding information, go here and turn off simple mode. That'll make the app work a little smoother and allow you to get after some of those other more advanced functions. I may do a separate video on the app. It can be a little confusing due mainly to all the features included in the radio. Now, before you ask, I registered when opening the app the first time, so I don't know how or if the app programs the radio without registering. All in all, I think the GA-5WB is a good radio and a reasonable value in this moderately priced HT category. The app programming may take a little getting used to, but having access to a nice graphical user interface on your phone is, in my opinion, worth a little extra practice. I'm also impressed with the radio's clean signal. So many budget class radios I've looked at recently are a mess. That's definitely not the case with the GA-5WB. Last for this short recap, I really like the ability to have APRS on board a reasonably priced radio. Most APRS-capable radios are quite a bit more expensive, or you need to use special wires and your phone to get APRS to work with a budget class HT. Join me over here for a couple of recent APRS videos if you'd like to learn more. In the meantime, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Gadget Talk channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and 73.